Listen closely, because I am only going to say this once. My name is Grace, and before this story begins, I need you to understand something. I am not a victim. I was never a victim. I was a weapon that had not yet found its target. By the time Alexander Vance understood the difference, it was already over for him. My father had chalk on his hands. That is where this story starts. Not in a billionaire's mansion, not in a marble bathroom with a scalpel. It starts with a school teacher's hands, trembling over hospital paperwork, and a daughter who made a private promise. I am going to fix this. The job offer arrived like an answer to a prayer I hadn't spoken out loud. Head housekeeper, Vance Family Estate, $5,000 a month. Cash. For a girl carrying her family's survival on her back, it wasn't just money. It was oxygen. I packed one suitcase, kissed my father's chalky hands, told him everything was going to be fine. I walked through those gates smiling. That was my first mistake. Alexander Vance was built for trust. Silver hair, warm eyes, the kind of face that cameras loved and people believed. He built hospitals in poor countries. He gave speeches at the United Nations about human dignity. Magazines called him a visionary. Audiences wept when he spoke. He did not see people. He assessed them. His wife, Elizabeth, was the cold intelligence behind the warm performance. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. She just lowered the temperature of whatever room she walked into. On my first day, she looked at me and said, "We value two things in this house, discretion and health." I thanked her. I mistook the warning for a welcome. That was my second mistake. The grooming lasted 3 months. At the time, it felt like kindness. It felt like being seen. Alexander asked about my family, my health history, what illnesses ran in my blood. He remembered everything I mentioned in passing. My father's favorite subject, the name of my childhood street, whether I preferred tea or coffee. "You have a very rare spirit, Grace," he told me one afternoon, studying me over his reading glasses, "and a very rare blood type. You are genuinely 1 in a million." I smiled. I felt seen. I didn't understand that to be seen by Alexander Vance was not a compliment. It was a diagnosis. Then there was Sarah. She arrived on a wet Wednesday in September. Wide eyes, handbag slightly too big for her frame. She was from Ohio, small town. She had never owned a passport. She wore a silver locket and touched it whenever she was nervous. We sat in the kitchen after midnight on her third night, whispering like schoolgirls. She told me about her plans, the money she'd send home, the places she'd see, the person she was going to become. She laughed at her own ambition, the way people do when they're not sure they're allowed to want things. I told her the wanting was allowed. The next morning, she was gone. Suitcase open on the rack, phone charging on the nightstand, toothbrush on the shelf, and the silver locket sitting alone on the white nightstand, like a full stop at the end of a sentence. Alexander mentioned her at dinner that evening, casually, the way you mention weather. Bright girl, Sarah. Sent her ahead to Geneva. Tremendous opportunity. Elizabeth murmured. Candles burned, silverware gleamed. I cleared the plates, but something had shifted inside me. Something cold, precise, patient, and it was not going anywhere. The answer came on a Tuesday night. The Vances had gone to a gala. I stood in the hallway and read the invitation on the table. The annual summit for victims of global trafficking. I felt a nausea that had nothing to do with illness. I was cleaning Alexander's study when I noticed it. The painting was not flush with the wall. He had drunk 3 glasses of scotch before leaving. He had grown careless. Behind the painting of the shipwreck, the safe was ajar. I stood before it for a long time. My father always said curiosity was a luxury the poor couldn't afford. But Sarah's locket was in my pocket, and 11 girls had arrived at that estate and not left with their suitcases, and the safe was right there, and I was done pretending I didn't already know. I opened it. That was the moment everything changed. The ledger was black leather, red ink, the handwriting of a man who had never once believed anyone would find it. Sarah Holloway. Lungs, $1.5 million. Condition, excellent. Status, completed. Destination, Dubai. Catherine Adeyemi. Kidneys, $800,000. Condition, fair. Status, completed. Destination, Silicon Valley. 11 names. 11 girls. Each one arrived with hope. Each one left in pieces. I turned to the final page. My photograph was paper-clipped to the corner. Beside it, in Alexander's own handwriting, Grace Miller, full cardiopulmonary match, reserved the Swiss contract, harvesting date, October 14th. I sat on the floor. 4 minutes, I know, because I watched the clock. 4 minutes while the last 3 months rearranged themselves into their true shape. The salary, the questions about my blood type, the wellness checks, the designer clothes, all of it an investment. And October 14th was the return date. They had paid for my father's life, with mine. I put the ledger back, closed the painting, straightened my uniform, walked to the front door and smiled as Alexander handed me his coat. "Good evening, Mr. Vance. How was the gala?" "Wonderful. We raised nearly $2 million for the cause." "How generous." I hung his coat, walked to the kitchen, turned on the tap, and standing at that sink in the dark, water running so no one could hear me, I made a promise. Not to run, not to scream, to make every single one of them pay, starting with the people who placed the orders. Because Alexander Vance was not the architect, he was just the supplier. The real architects were behind screens. I found them on the 5th night of my investigation. A folder with no label, a recurring calendar entry, 4 attendees, 18 months of archived meetings. I pressed play, and 4 screens filled the dark library. The first, a Middle Eastern businessman, gold-lit office, fingers laced on mahogany, the absolute stillness of a man who has never been told no. He was reviewing Sarah's transaction like a property inspection report, satisfied with the quality, requesting first right of refusal on the next cardiopulmonary match. He never said Sarah's name. He had never known it. The second, an elderly man in a glass penthouse above a city of lights. Short sentences, eyes that never moved. He was dissatisfied with Catherine's transaction. Grade A prices require Grade A results. He closed a folder with finality. He never said Catherine's name either. The third was a European woman, candle-lit estate, pearls, 3 centuries of old money in the stone around her. She spoke with the elegance of someone who considers impatience a form of poverty. She had placed the Swiss contract. She spoke of the Lausanne acquisition with the satisfaction of a collector awaiting a long-anticipated piece. Then she adjusted the ring on her finger and said, almost as an afterthought, "Make sure the asset remains in optimal condition until delivery." The asset. She was talking about me. She was talking about my heart. with the same tone she would use to discuss a wine vintage. The fourth was an American, glass tower, sharp jaw, impatient, drumming one finger on his desk. 2 orders pending, needed timelines confirmed before the quarter closed. Before the quarter closed, as if the beating hearts of living people were line items on a financial calendar. I sat in that dark library when the recording ended. 4 people, 4 screens, 4 magnificent rooms, not one human word between them. Just transaction, just commerce, just the clean language of acquisition applied to things that were never meant to be bought. That's when I knew this wasn't just about Alexander anymore. I had all 4 of them now, and I was going to use every single one.
I spent the next 2 weeks becoming a different kind of invisibility. Not the invisibility of a servant, the invisibility of a loaded weapon sitting quietly on a shelf. I befriended Marcus, the estate's IT technician, quiet man, ate lunch alone, had been paid for years not to notice things he had already noticed, and the weight of it showed in how he held his shoulders. I brought him coffee. I asked about his work. 3 days later, he showed me the bypass architecture. Every night, between midnight and 3, I was in the library, copying offshore accounts, pulling buyer recordings, linking transfers to ledger entries, cross-referencing disappearance dates with private airfield flight records, building a file so complete, so precisely sourced, so impossible to dismiss that no lawyer alive and no amount of money could make it disappear. 4 buyers, 11 transactions, dozens of shell companies across 6 continents. I packaged everything. Then I waited. October 9th. That was the night I almost broke. I found Catherine's financial record. $800,000, Cayman Shell Company, 4 days after she vanished. And below the transfer, in small administrative text, CA, complications during procedure, additional medical costs deducted from final payment. Catherine had not made it. I sat on the bathroom floor for a long time. I thought about the airport, about my father, about whether one person can actually stand against this much power, or whether trying is just a more dignified way of being destroyed. Then I thought about the woman in the candlelit estate, adjusting her pearls, calling me an asset. I stood up, dried my face, looked at myself in the mirror. Not yet, I told myself. Not until every single one of them is finished. I went back to the laptop. October 14th arrived with clear skies and beautiful weather, the kind of day that has no idea what it is hosting. Elizabeth came to my room at 9 in the evening, tea on a silver tray. She sat beside my bed and held my hand like a mother. She watched me drink. She said, "You're going to save a great man's life tomorrow. You should feel honored." She left. I walked to the bathroom and made myself vomit. I changed into a dark t-shirt and jeans, put Sarah's locket in my pocket. My heart was hammering. My thoughts were sharp and surgical. I had been building a tolerance to their sedative for 11 days. Tonight, I needed to be more awake than I had ever been in my life. At 1 in the morning, the vehicles arrived. 4 of them. Black windows, 12 figures in medical scrubs, equipment cases unloaded with the quiet efficiency of a team that had done this in many houses before this one. They moved toward the basement. I moved toward the server room. Marcus's bypass code, 7 seconds. Cooling system offline, 1:14 a.m. Temperature alarms triggered, 1:19 a.m. Security grid shut down, 1:22 a.m. Every gate unlocking, every camera rerouting, the entire architecture of control dismantling itself to protect its own hardware. I walked through the dark hallways I knew better than my own heartbeat, past Sarah's door, past Catherine's door, to the study where Alexander stood screaming into a satellite phone. I crossed the room in 6 steps. He did not hear me coming. He had stopped hearing me years ago. That was his final mistake.
When Alexander Vance woke up on the cold marble floor of his master bathroom, there was a scalpel at his throat. His own scalpel, from his own preparation kit. And a laptop open on the counter, showing his entire financial empire exposed and uploading, red progress bar at 93%. He tried the threat first. "You're dead, Grace. Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes, I know exactly who you are. And I know exactly who they are, the man in the gold-lit office who requested first right of refusal on my heart, the one in the glass penthouse who complained about Catherine like she was a defective product, the woman with the candles and the pearls who called me an asset and told me to keep me in optimal condition until delivery. The American who needed my heart confirmed before the quarter closed." I watched his face change. 18 months of their meetings are in the upload. Every order, every name, every voice. He tried the charm next, the warm voice, the fatherly tone. He offered money, partnership, generational wealth, safety for my family. And I will say this for him, even on a bathroom floor with a scalpel at his throat, he was still convincing. Almost. I said, "My father taught school for 31 years. He never once asked a student to pay for what knowledge cost him." I looked at the progress bar. Everything I know about what a person is worth, I learned from a man with chalk on his hands. 97%. And right now, Alexander, you are worth nothing. 100%. Every camera in the estate went live simultaneously, streaming to the New York Times, to the FBI's Public Corruption Division, to the Interpol Financial Crimes Unit, the same unit whose contact I had found in Alexander's own files, the man he had been bribing for 4 years to look away. 18 months of buyer meetings, 4 faces, 4 voices, 4 powerful people placing orders for human beings with the casual authority of people ordering from a menu. I pressed his thumb to the biometric scanner. The offshore accounts moved. Every dollar. Gone. The lights flickered once. Then the Simon started. Now let me tell you what happened next, because this is my favorite part. Alexander was arrested on the bathroom floor. Elizabeth was taken from the base of the main staircase at 2:04 a.m., still dressed for an evening she had believed would end very differently. Dr. Sterling was found in the basement, surrounded by equipment that told its own story without a single word from me. And then, across the world, behind 4 screens, the reckoning arrived at each door. The man in the gold-lit office, visited by Interpol before his morning prayer. The glass penthouse in Hong Kong, dark, 14 shell companies frozen across 11 jurisdictions, before breakfast. The woman in the candle-lit estate, removed from her 3-century-old dining room in handcuffs. I'm told she accepted this with a cold dignity. It impressed no one. The American in the glass tower, arrested at 6 in the morning, mid-call with his lawyer, still trying to negotiate the terms of a world that had already ended for him. 4 screens, 4 buyers, 4 powerful people who looked at human lives and saw only mathematics. Not one of them had ever considered that the inventory might be watching back. I walked out of the Vance estate at 1:47 in the morning. I did not run. I walked, past the manicured hedges, through the service gate, down the road, into a car, onto a highway, watching the lights of the estate disappear in the side mirror. Sarah's locket was in my pocket. I still have it, not as a trophy, as a reminder of what this was actually for. 11 names in a black leather book. 11 girls who arrived with hope and wide eyes and small suitcases and plans for their lives. I have not forgotten a single one. My father is well. When I came home, he held my hands across the kitchen table the way he had in that hospital room and looked at me for a long time. "You came back different," he said. "Yes," I said. "What did it cost you?" I thought about Catherine, about the night on the bathroom floor when I almost chose the airport, about the version of myself that existed inside that safe. It cost me my innocence, but I was going to lose that either way inside those walls. At least this way. I chose the price. He was quiet. Then, "Are you finished?" I looked at my hands, still, steady, the same hands that held a scalpel in a marble bathroom, that pressed a thumb to a biometric scanner, that walked out of a gate without running. "No," I said. "Because there are more houses like that one, more gates built to keep secrets in, more girls arriving with worn suitcases and enormous hope, being studied over reading glasses and told they are 1 in a million, not yet understanding what that means in the language of people who see human beings as line items. More buyers behind more screens, more magnificent rooms, more clean transactions in the language of acquisition applied to things that were never meant to be bought. I know how those houses work. I know where the servers are. I know how the cooling systems go offline. I know that the powerful stop watching the people they serve. And I know that this is their oldest and most fatal mistake. So to the networks, the brokers, the buyers, the ones in the bespoke suits and the candle-lit estates and the glass towers and the gold-lit offices, listen carefully. We are in your houses right now, hanging your coats, clearing your plates, learning your bypass codes, copying your files, building the case that ends you one night at a time, in the dark, while you sleep. You thought our gratitude made us harmless. You thought our silence meant we weren't paying attention. You were wrong on both counts. We are not your inventory. We are your reckoning. And we are patient. We have always been patient. We learned it from the people you never noticed, quietly working in every room of every house you ever built to keep your secrets in. The gates were never tall enough, and if you are listening carefully right now, you might already know. We are already inside.